Good morning and welcome to the 11th meeting in 2026 of the Finance and Public Administration Committee. This is the committee's last meeting before the Parliament's dissolution ahead of the 7th of May election. We have one public item on our agenda today, which should take evidence from the Scottish Public Pensions Agency on the delivery of the MacLeod remedy in Scotland. For this item, we are also joined by one of our colleagues, Oliver Mundell, MSP. Before we start the evidence session, I remind everyone that its purpose is not to raise individual cases and concerns, but to consider wider issues such as progress with delivery of the MacLeod remedy, the systems, processes and approaches taken by the SPPA, as well as communication, governance, accountability and transparency matters. I welcome to the meeting Dr Stephen Patharana, Chief Executive Officer of the Scottish Public Pensions Agency, Christopher Nairns, Chief Operating Officer, and Francis Graham, Chief Transformation Officer. I'd like to wish all our witnesses good morning and invite Dr Patharana to make a short opening statement. Dr Patharana.
Thank you, Convener. Morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to update the committee on the SPPA's further progress to deliver on MacLeod remedy. Since I last updated you in December, Audit Scotland has published a Section 22 report alongside the SPPA's accounts and annual audit report. I would like to record that we welcome Audit Scotland's unqualified opinion of our accounts and the recommendations in its annual audit report. We continue to work constructively with Audit Scotland and look forward to sharing with the Public Audit Committee later today the ways in which we are addressing areas for improvement. I'd also like to reiterate the apology I made when last before the committee for the delays in delivering MacLeod remedy. We've always sought to give accurate information to our members and with the best possible intentions, shared estimated timelines based on our knowledge at the time. Knowing what we know now, we, and I'm sure other pensions administrators, wish we had communicated better earlier. We recognise transparency must accompany delivery for members to have confidence in the agency, and we'll continue to report openly on progress. And so I'd like to express my gratitude to our pension scheme members for their continued patience as we work to achieve the outcome we all want. That is, everyone who's eligible having been offered and made their remedy choice and seen this choice reflected in their payments. Of course, our members will still be able to retire and to receive their full pension based on the rules in place at the time. And in fact, we know at least around 70% of retired members are already on the scheme that is most advantageous to them. When it became clear to the UK government that the original statutory timeframes were overly ambitious and had underestimated the scale of the challenge, it had a significant knock-on effect on pension providers, which meant that inevitably preparations fell short. As the scale and complexity of remedy became apparent, this threw into sharp relief the reality that public pensions administrators were unable to respond as quickly or as effectively as we would have wished. Our pension system provider, along with others in the UK, could not carry out retrospective comparisons of benefits for individual members under both pension schemes, which is essential for remedy, and there was no off-the-shelf technical solution. To issue choice letters to approximately a third of our 600,000 members, we have had to develop our own solutions to make complex calculations and automate as much of the process as possible. Since I last appeared before the committee, we have continued to focus on delivering solutions to enable remedy service statements out for our retired members, including issuing our first choice statements for retired firefighter. As of yesterday, we'd issued 37% of these, which exceeds where we aim to be by the end of March. Although advances in our pilots in the police scheme were achieving economies of scale, there are benefits that this is benefiting firefighters, NHS and teacher schemes. For example, we've cut the time to process basic NHS pensions administration from 2 hours to under half an hour through a new calculation module. In fact, we've made significant progress in delivering digital transformation over the last 12 months. Our ongoing investment in people and IT will help deliver remedy and raise service levels for members in the future. We've digitised employer data for police and fire schemes. We are actively onboarding employers into the teacher scheme with full digitisation expected by the end of 2027. We've launched a new member portal, Engage, across all 4 schemes since I last met with the committee. Functionality is evolving and the portal will give instant access to a range of self-service options, pension information, historic documents and scheme guidance. We have released online pension modeller for police and NHS members, offering instant remedy compliant pension projections. Development for a teachers modeller is in progress. As we look to the future, we are committed to completing remedy and investing in IT and data management services required to give a service to our members that they are entitled to expect from a modern pensions administrator. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that opening statement. I also want to thank you, Dr Patharanity, for agreeing to come back to see us today, but also for the very detailed correspondence that you've provided to the committee, including the answers to many of the questions that we felt were unanswered at our last session. So I find that very helpful. Of course, the committee does have further questions to ask, and I'll kick off by first of all talking about the kind of resources that you have available to you to do this kind of work. So, for example, I understand that the SPP is expected to incur costs and administration of around £20 million. And as we discussed last time, we've recruited 100 members of staff on temporary contract to help with the remedy process. So how temporary are these additional staff members, and what kind of turnover have you experienced with regard to this new cohort?
Thank you, Convener. So in terms of the staff we brought into the agency, that 100 staff hasn't just happened in the last year. It has started prior to my arrival. In fact, since my arrival in the agency, I've not actually grown the number of permanent staff in the organisation. It stayed roughly where it was. We've not seen a high turnover in the staff that we've brought in. People are in on fixed-term contracts. There to support our pensions administration service so that we can release our more experienced pensions administrators to work on McLeod Remedy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, to an extent, yeah, but I'm just what I'm trying to get at really is to ensure that you do have you are fully staffed for the work that's required, and that you will indeed have the complement of additional staff you require until this process is effectively completed.
So maybe to add to that, then there's still a few more staff we're currently onboarding into the organisation as we work towards doing the manual processing for the NHS pension McLeod Remedy work. We've obviously forecast through our financial forecasting the resources we need both for the rest of this financial year, and we receive the resources that we need from ministers and Scottish Parliament in the budget bill, and we forecast what we need into future years to continue the work to completion. So I would say at the moment we have the resources allocated that we're looking for, and the people, obviously there's still people we're onboarding, but largely we have what we need at the moment. So
the Scottish Government has provided additional funding. Is that in order to deliver to the new timetables that you've set yourself?
So if you were looking at the Audit Scotland report, you will see that when I came into the role, this is a while ago now, I assessed the forward resources we would need to meet McLeod Remedy, and based on our understanding of delivery around the police scheme and the complexities of that. That's what I set out to ministers, and it's on that basis that ministers have allocated resourcing.
Okay, now I understand that you were going to meet the Minister on the 18th of February. We actually got a letter from him addressed on the 17th of February to undertake a deep dive of McLeod Remedy delivery in the Police Pensions Immediate Choice cohort, member communications and engagement in SPPA resources. So I'm just wondering if you can advise as to what transpired from that meeting and how it will help you move forward.
Well, it was, from our perspective, it was really an update to the Minister, helping me understand the detailed work that's going on to complete the police delivery, some of the work that needs to happen around the individual cohorts as we work towards completion. And in terms of, it wasn't a discussion, for example, around additional resources beyond and above what we have been allocated or asked for.
Okay. So, okay, fair enough. I mean, one of the things that you've also pointed out is that there doesn't seem to be any ability to compare how the SPP is working relative to other areas in the UK. And is that because the United Kingdom government does not centralise information on that?
So we've obviously asked the Treasury to whether it's collecting that information. It isn't. What we do have is insight into how things are going across the rest of the UK from our individual engagements with our... Sorry?
Sorry, it's anecdotal rather than
Well, there is
specific.
some public information available which you can, which is available out there, but I don't have any official information. I think so. I've provided in the letter to you the information that is available, which shares with you that, broadly speaking, police delivery in England is in a similar position to delivery in Scotland. We know that the NHS scheme in England is still to set timeframes for delivery of McLeod Remedy. One of the things we're actually doing with, obviously we know that we share a lot of the same challenges around NHS delivery as they do in England. We've actually got the team from England coming up to spend time with us because we may have solved problems they've not solved. They may have solved problems we've not solved, and we may be able to help each other out to speed up delivery on both parties. So we work closely with our counterparts where we can across the rest of the UK.
I think your best practice is always a sensible way forward. I mean, you know, the Minister has said that it's unfortunate, despite the McLeod Remedy being a UK-wide issue and one the UK Government responsible for creating, that the UK Government has not provided any additional central funding to departments or devolved administrations to manage this programme of work. Have you received any explanation as to why that's the case?
I'm afraid, Convener, I haven't. I don't, you know, I presume they've made a judgment that anything would flow through the Barnett formula, but I don't have an answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the issues that we've received, I think, all of us in terms of from constituents, is an issue which you've addressed in the letter to us, but I think it's important to put it on the record, is why the police scheme is further forward. And you've said that the data within the police scheme is generally in a better position than other schemes. This is mainly due to Police Scotland being a single employer which sends its data to us monthly. This differs for NHS and teachers, where we receive their data return annually, whilst we do also receive Scottish Fire and Rescue Service data monthly. We needed to receive backdated information from the SFRS before being able to enable remedy processing. So I'm just wondering if you can talk us through that, in particular the issue in relation to firefighters, because it seems to me strange that they're also reporting monthly, but there's a problem there that doesn't seem to arise relative to the police.
And there's a very, very good reason for that. And they do report, we do get monthly data from the SFRS in terms of, in the same way we do for police. However, McLeod Remedy isn't the only legislative project we have to do corrections on. There are other legislative projects, one in particular called Booth, which is to do with a court case in England, which gives certain firefighters access to additional pension benefits in relation to training that they carry out. Essentially meant that, and the challenge with that is to correct the Booth work, it has an overlap with McLeod Remedy. And this was data, and I'm talking about historic data going back a decade or more. This was data that was never collected because it was never part of pensions administration for fire by us or by SFRS. Sorry. So we had to get that data from them so we could work out which individual members were impacted by both McLeod and Booth. And so that when we do the calculations for McLeod, we're doing them correctly for the people that are impacted or not impacted, and we can do the correction for Booth at the same time. So that data took quite a while to get to us. And again, I think that part of the reason for that is because it was archived data that stemmed from actually before FRS was a single body, and they needed to pull all that data together, get it to us. And that was a key barrier in terms of us progressing fire at the same pace as police. And again, it's also illustrative of the challenges as a pensions administrator, where we are heavily dependent on what we receive from employers to better carry out our functions and responsibilities effectively.
So, as we move forward, is the police system going to be, for example, a model of how you hope to see pensions progressed in future, you know, with monthly data, etc., across Scotland? Is there a way, are you looking beyond the immediate difficulties that you have to the future in that regard?
Yeah, so I'll draw Chris in now, because this is something we're actively working on, and Chris can show you a little bit about how we're approaching that. I must stress, though, that obviously historic data is always historic data. It's the data you've received going back years, which is always going to have the challenges associated with it. All we can do is get to the point where, going forward, the data we receive is better. Chris?
Yeah, I think it's worth reiterating the differential we have between historic data and new data. I think for both the police and fire schemes, we've reached the model for future data collection and current data collection that we are extending into the teacher scheme currently. And we're in very early discussions about extending that into the NHS scheme. So in answer to the question, yes, the police and fire schemes are there. I think the issue for us in terms of the remedy piece and the other legislative remedies that we have for fire was historic data going over previous decades.
Yeah, so we're hoping that in 10 years we're not going to end up with this kind of similar situation repeating itself. Okay, now one of the things I've been looking at in terms of the detail that you've provided to us is that you've talked about, you know, different terms used such as immediate choice, active cohort, deferred choice, and you've also talked about, as we discussed last time, the different categories of cases: simple, moderate and complex. Some take 5-10 minutes to process, but the complex ones have involved up to 12 categories and take more than 8 hours to process. So I'm just wondering, given that the simple ones take 5 to 10 minutes, where are we now in terms of ensuring that they are all delivered? Because one would have thought they'd be pretty easy to get off your desk, so to speak.
Yeah, so I might bring in Francis in a minute to provide more. So as I kind of explained previously, it's a layering. You have to do the simple first and then you work up through it. But Francis, do you want to share a little bit exactly where we are in all of this?
Yes, so from our automation, we have worked through our simple cases for police, fire, NHS and teachers. We've used the support of the Scottish Government Centre of Excellence automation team, and we have got almost all of those out. So those were the first cases that we started looking at, where members were protected. They had been protected and were still in their final salary schemes when they retired. Those were the easiest to do the dual calculations on first. Those were the first set of calculations we did for each of the 4 schemes. And then, as Stephen said, we started to layer on top of it the different complexities. So looking at members who had been tapered over a period, who had been protected for a certain level, for members who were completely unprotected when they had retired. So most of that depended on the date that they retired, as well as the information that we had available at the time for those retiring. So we have done the majority of those, but for police, as an example, once we had done our original easier cases and sent those out, because there was no point in holding on to them, we then had to develop further. We're on 27 calculators now to be able to make the different changes, the different algorithms based on individual circumstances.
Yeah, because I mean, in terms of police pensions, there seemed to be a huge leap forward in the first half of last year, and then it seems to have trickled since then, and that's obviously of concern to the people who are in that 15% who've yet to be sorted.
And might I add to that, Convener, that's part of what we'd modelled and projected, that, you know, there's a certain proportion we can do relatively quickly, and then you have more processing, including manual interventions you have to take to process that remaining cohort, which is what takes the time.
And I take your point also in the response that, you know, the IT systems weren't really designed for the kind of the impact of the MacLeod remedy on the SPPA, and work has had to be done to bring them up to speed. Now, in terms of the programme level objectives to assist further prioritisation decision-making, you've listed 5 here. The second one is getting it right first time, providing accurate and clear statements, information and support for members to make informed remedy choices. So what kind of What are you doing in terms of quality control there to make sure you get it right, if not 100% of the time, then at least 99% of the time? Because I think one of the issues with complexity which involves with manual and IT is it sets alarm bells ringing, thinking, well, there's plenty of opportunities for things to go wrong, and so there has to be cross-checking, etc., blah, blah, blah. So I'm just wondering what processes you have to ensure that when the remedy is delivered, it's delivered.
Thank you. Again, I'll let Francis expand on that.
So we have a number of processes that we follow through. There are calculators that are now looking at the calculation in the legacy scheme and in the care scheme. We do some manual calcs beside them to check them against examples. We then work them through. There are a number of subject matter experts in the team who check those calculations, and then when everybody's comfortable that the calculator is doing as it was expected and producing the right number, we then send that to the Government Actuarial Department, who we've been working very closely with throughout. The Government Actuarial Department do some testing on that. They check out the outcomes and the final numbers as well. And we have a number of those that go through before we can say that the algorithm works and that we're 100% confident that the algorithm is producing the right number at the end.
And is it 100%?
It's.
I mean, are you getting people coming back challenging it, or do you feel that you are absolutely spot on in terms of the delivery and accurate in terms of accuracy?
Given the checks that we've had from the Government Actuarial Department, yes, we are very comfortable with it.
It doesn't always mean people understand the calculation, so I'm not saying people don't come back and challenge it, because it is really hard to understand the calculations, but I think the government actuarial assurance process that we have in place is robust, and we can't do better than that.
That people have confidence in terms of final decisions, so you know it's delayed, and when it does deliver, that it's actually accurate. One thing, though, I just want to ask you about before I open up the session to colleagues is, in terms of the annexes you provided an Annex A which said delivery progress to 3rd of March 2024 by scheme. Is that right, or is it not 2026?
Sorry, I must have made there must be a typo somewhere.
I just wanted to, because it just looked odd to me, that was all, actually, when I saw
I don't have that in front of me to tell you what mistake. I'm very happy to write to you and clarify.
Yeah, it just seemed really quite strange why we would be given that, so I just assumed it was a typo, but wanted to check. So I think accuracy, is always something that we can check on. Okay, colleagues are quite keen to come in, as you would imagine, so the first to do so will be Michael, to be followed by John.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for evidence so far and for coming back to us again, Dr Pathirana. I'll perhaps use some cases in this to illustrate some of the issues rather than seeking particular remedy, and they will all be anonymised, because since your last appearance, I think in common with colleagues around the table, I've received a large volume of correspondence, not just from my own region, actually from across the country, about... and I wouldn't say that you said at the start you want to thank members for their patience, members of the scheme. I always think of patience as a choice. I think you would have to recognise, Dr Pathirana, that these people don't have a choice. What I would recognise is anger and, amongst some of them, resignation, but certainly anger. Would you recognise that they don't have a choice and that patience is perhaps not the word?
So I recognise what you're saying. That we can only process things as quickly as we can process them, like any other pensions administrator across the UK. Without doubt, that'd be frustrating for members, and we are, as I've said, I've apologised previously for that. So, yeah.
I think a teacher in Dundee who retired in September 2021, in October 25, was told that it could be the summer of 2026 when he hears what his remedy would be. So a 5-year delay, really significant in terms of the kind of life choices they would make. We've gone through some of these instances before in your last session, but that's the kind of circumstance that people are facing, and you would recognise that.
I recognise it, and I would stress as well that as we've shared with you, we've shared some data, particularly around police, that we know that, and this is one of the challenges around McLeod remedies, that most people will already be on the best pension possible of the people that receive a choice, at least 70%, probably for NHS and teachers, you're probably in excess of 80%. And for the majority of people, even in those schemes, if you were, for example, a teacher at the top of your pay scale in the last few years of your career, whether it's final salary or care average, it will make almost no difference to your pension. The people that benefit from this are the people who have had significant pay increments into management positions over that period of time or after that period of time.
And the evidence that you brought to us last time, I suppose there was a focus on, given what we're already talking about in terms of pace, the need to actually pick up that pace and deliver it. And there was lots of talk about percentages delivery in different schemes. I suppose part of the concern from the committee was that you seemed focused on delivering those percentages, and perhaps that those might be the simple cases, as you put it, with a very much smaller, shorter amount of time to be dedicated to it. And actually some of these more complex cases would be pushed further down the road. I mean, is that how it's working? You're trying to get those numbers up at the expense of people who have more complex calculations?
Absolutely not. And I've said this many times, and hopefully I thought I'd convey this effectively to the committee previously, that because of the nature of the complex cases, you can get to the point where you do this, you've delivered the simple cases, and then you build the calculator iteratively on top if you have people impacted by more factors. So there isn't a shortcut to doing the more complex cases over the more simple cases. So there's no prioritisation of the simple cases over the complex cases. They're just you're able to deliver them more quickly because you've solved the problems for those types of cases on your pathway to delivering for the more complex cases.
And you've also set out in the evidence that you've come back to us on for some of these perhaps more complex cases that there is a prioritisation or a possible prioritisation with people perhaps facing medical issues or end-of-life issues. Now, these are, I think, will also characterise certainly my inbox in terms of the people, and also people come up to me in the street and telling me about the challenges that they face as a result of this. So can you tell the committee and put on the record a little bit how you manage that process where people can indicate to your agency that they have their partner or they might have cancer, that they have to actually deal with the situation? Because I could give you a few cases where this was happening. How do they get to the point where they can get a decision more quickly so they have some option to get what they deserve and what they're entitled to at end of life?
May I bring my colleague Chris in to share how we kind of approach those kind of cases?
Yeah, I think in terms of prioritisation, it's something that I think Francis might be able to answer more in terms of how we're drafting up the cohorts that we're looking at. I think in terms of any life events that members are facing into, we have engaged with member representatives, particularly unions. We have engaged with employers, and we've engaged with a number of stakeholders across our whole member base to ensure that, particularly where there is a life-changing event, that there is an escalation route through employers, through unions, directly into our engagement teams, directly into our operational staff, where we can pick these up, particularly around terminal ill health, particularly around members that may be looking for details for mortgage information or other life events, where we are able to progress those more quickly. We are certainly doing so. There are instances, however, where we're simply in contact with the members to explain the timelines that we're able to work to, because if there is a calculator available, then we'll process that case. If there isn't, then we need to deal with the member as best we can. And I think prioritisation is a cohort analysis piece for Francis.
Sorry, if I can maybe pick up with this, and I'll let you in, Francis. I mean, you've mentioned that there are routes through trade unions or employers. Can individuals flag their own case as having these instances? Yes. They can?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Francis?
I think as Chris is saying, we are building these calculators. As we go through building these calculators, we have lots of different elements that we need to take into it. The scheme rules, how to treat tax, how to treat injury benefits versus ill health. It's, the complexity is something that we are still dealing with on a daily basis. But the complexity means that the higher priorities are not always dealt with first. And one of the things that we need to be very careful of is if we've not actually managed to work out the tax implications and the full algorithm based on the scheme rules to make the calculations, it would be wrong for us to try to do that manually on a one-off basis to then put something into payment that we would then need to go back and rectify at a later date.
Okay, I'm sure colleagues want to pursue some of these issues as well. Can I come then to the issue about the return to the ability to make predictions, which I raised with you at the last session, and Dr. Patharana, you said within the next 2 years we will definitely be able to move back to the place where we were in before. We were able to provide people with statements when they request them. I mean, this is a huge issue for people across Scotland. And if yeah, please, I'll let you in, and then I'll maybe...
So, I could have answered that question better at the time. Hopefully, I'll answer it better now. And I think the key thing I want to really convey, and I'll go hand over to Chris to share a little bit more around what we've done actually to address that, even since we spoke to you, is that I've got no desire to take the agency back to the service it was delivering prior to Remedy. I want to take it forward to a better, different service that gives members much more instant information. So, Chris.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the provision of estimates and benefit information, I think it's fair to say we have delivered to our active members. The vast majority have received an annual benefit statement in the course of the last 6 months. For those members seeking an estimate or a particular projection at a moment in time, over the course of the last few months, we have put online a Remedy compliant pension estimate modeller for the police service, for the NHS service. We're in final testing stages for the fire service, and we are scoping the teachers service currently. What this will allow is members to access an online pension estimate modeller at any time, and they are able to input their information, input their future dates, and understand their benefit availability at any given moment in time.
I have a teacher from East Ayrshire who got in touch with me the last week saying they've had no annual statement or update on pension scheme benefits since 2022. So 4 years. So when you're saying the majority of people are receiving this, there are people out there who have no idea and they're not receiving any information. Is that correct?
There's I don't know, Francis, whether you want to pick up.
I don't have the percentages to hand, but there is a small percentage, sort of 5 to 10%, in each of the schemes where we can't provide an annual benefit statement. That falls into a multitude of reasons. So for people who are awaiting transfers, so they may have transferred from one school to another and we're waiting on the details coming through. It may be that the individual has bought added years or additional pension and we're unable to do those calculations at the moment. It is a small percentage, but obviously for that percentage of individuals who have not been able to access their annual benefit statement, that still has an impact on them. We have written to the people who were unable to access their annual benefit statement. So I wonder if it's just that the member in particular, I don't know, may need to access the system to see it.
No, it certainly doesn't appear to be so, because there's been correspondence in October saying that it would take 12 weeks. The deadline that was set for January is passed. There's nothing there, but there's no benefit statement coming in the interim. Can I ask back about, you're saying we're not going back to what was happening before. Previously, there was a commitment that you could deliver an estimate 6 months out from retirement, but now you're saying that there's going to be a digital online calculator. Is that a replacement for an inquiry that might be at the 6-month period?
So, again, I might come to Chris to share more, but fundamentally, what we want to bear to move to as we go forward is a digital first solution for our members, so they can go through the portal, access their information, the ability to go in and do their own, check their own estimates. It doesn't mean where people request it, we won't be able to provide it. But again, if the tools are there, then what that does in practice is it takes a lot of the immediate demand away, which gives us more capacity to help the members that really need it. Chris?
It sounds like you are replacing the inquiry model with an online calculator, which is not what you told committee last time. So is this a solution that's emerged since you were here?
No, it was... So as I said, I didn't give you the best possible answer at the time. This was work that was underway, and I didn't answer the question well.
Okay, so so it's not just that it's a time frame substitution. It's a whole new it's a whole new model and approach for delivering it. And if I can compare then, because some of this, I mean, is, you know, the convener mentioned issues about resourcing across the whole of the UK. I have a case of a health worker in Aberdeenshire who has, I think I actually raised this with you last time in part, who has had a very different experience of their work and life in England, where they were able to be provided with an estimate within half an hour, speaking to somebody on the phone. They didn't have to wait, and it was at any point in their approach to retirement, and they've been waiting years now for the SPPA to actually deliver it. And you know, you've talked quite a bit about benchmarking, Dr. Patharana, about across the rest of the UK, but the experience here is contrasted, and the experience they have with your agency is appalling.
So, as Francis shared, there are a small number of members that we haven't been able to do this for. They are remedy impacted members, which is significant. They form part of the people that are deferred members, which obviously we have a plan to get to. The work that we're doing around that will see us get to that place around kind of August, September time in terms of delivery for those remaining people we've not been able to provide that for. I can't do anything about what happened or the SPPA did historically. I can only put right things that I pick up, which I am doing. In terms of benchmarking across the rest of the UK, as you'll be aware, there are many other public sector pension schemes that are struggling to actually ensure people retire properly on time with their pension. That's something we've ensured in the SPPA, despite the impacts and challenges of McLeod Remedy, has not been derailed.
Okay, thank you. John, to perform by Liz.
Very much, Convener. Probably to touch on some of the issues that have already been raised. I mean, I'm not that keen on comparing everything with England, but I was struck by in your paper that you said that National Police Chiefs Council figures for police schemes show 96% delivery at December 2025. And you also say in December, I reported 85% of the immediate choice casework for the police scheme. As at 3rd March, we were at 89%. So that does suggest we're quite a long way behind England.
It's a different figure. So the 96% is across immediate choice and deferred choice. We're at 94% across immediate and deferred choice for police. So this is the problem with looking at the data from other places. They're not necessarily... The data I provide you on immediate choice, which was 85 now, at just about 90. What the police scheme, the collective police schemes in England are predicting is that they'll be 99% complete by the middle of this year on immediate choice. That's exactly where we will be. So we're marking it on the same basis.
It's slightly reassuring. But it says, I mean, it said that 3 public sector schemes in the UK are struggling or haven't even got deadlines. So you're ahead of them, obviously. But 3 doesn't seem certainly very many.
But they are the compare. 2 of those are 2 of the schemes that we are actually responsible for here in Scotland.
Okay. And the deferred ones, some of them, because you said that when you take the deferred and the immediate choice ones together, but I understood that there was no deferred ones had been issued?
So this is where it gets really complex because there are so many different cohorts. There are 2 types of deferred. There's people that are deferred because they're yet to retire, and within the deferred, there are people that are still employed, i.e. the people still working, for example, for Police Scotland. For those ones we have issued for Police Scotland, it must be kind of 98% or something like that, or 99% of the deferred. For the people, for example, that may have left employment with Police Scotland, I'm using Police Scotland as an example, but gone to work somewhere else, we still have to prepare and issue those ones. We don't actually have exactly the same obligations around doing that for deferred members in the way that we do for that type of deferred members over the deferred members that are in the scheme. I'm really sorry that this is where it gets horribly messy and complicated, but either way, we have a programme in place to complete that work around kind of summer, autumn this year. What we're trying to do is focus on the immediate choice, which is obviously the people that are retired, the people that are waiting, and that's where our priorities are and remain and will be.
Yes. I mean, obviously, I do accept that people who have not yet retired, it's less important, although people are planning to retire and what they get in their pension will be a factor. And I mean, kind of tied to that is this, you're probably familiar with this 1919 magazine, which I think the Police Federation produce, amongst others. Now, I mean, they're talking about 90 officers who did not leave, I think, the 2015 scheme. They felt there was something wrong and have therefore been proven right. But they are now being treated as if they have not had continual service.
So this is to do with contingent decisions. So this is a really good example of the challenges of sitting within a UK framework, legal framework, as a devolved administration and Scottish ministers, and the SPPA's ability to take corrective action. So let me unpack that for you a little bit. So the UK MacLeod remedy legislation, in its framing, and this is UK government, didn't allow for provisions in the primary legislation to address exactly the problem impacted by these individuals you're talking about. Because of that, now the thing that we would have liked to see as a devolved government is for the UK government to amend the primary legislation so that we could then, through secondary legislation, correct and address the problem. The UK government was minded not to do that. So what we're in a situation now where we're dependent on a legally compliant UK-wide solution that we can all as devolved administrations put into legislation, bring to Parliament and put into legislation to address the problem. And that's really challenging within the context of the UK-wide framing. So we are working very closely with the UK government, along with other devolved administrators, to work out what that solution might be. But it's not something that's currently within the gift of the SPPA or Scottish ministers to correct until that is available. So while we ultimately have the responsibility to deliver the solution to the members, we're not able to enact that.
Well, I understand that, and therefore I've got some sympathy with you. But for these 90 people, or however many in that cohort, I mean, it is having quite a serious impact on them, isn't it? I mean, they're having to continue working when they probably might not have wanted to. So
within that 90 cohort, so some of these people won't be anywhere near retirement. What they want to be able to do is buy back into the old scheme, because the benefits, they prefer those benefits, and they'd chosen to opt out at a particular point in time, all linked to dates and things like that. I think we're aware of, 4 or 5 individuals that that have the required years of service, 25 years service, or have reached a certain age. There's a couple of criteria that apply. So there are a number of people that impacts, absolutely. We're in touch with those people. We've explained the situation as it is for them. We would love to better do more to address it. We're doing everything we can. It's just not within our gift to resolve.
We'll be pressuring the MPs to do something on that, so whatever. Okay. Now, you said that it's a minority, I think 26%, that are actually choosing to change when they're given their RSS. Is that correct? And that it's
police specifically. Police specifically,
okay. And they're getting about £178 per month better than otherwise, so that's all good. Now, how does that impact the £1.7 billion estimate for what this is all going to cost? Are we clearer on that? Is it up? Is it down?
So the estimates were, it was only ever a UK-wide estimate that was done by the government actuary at the time MacLeod was identified and addressed. When we say 1.75 billion, it's just because we've assumed a 10% share of that, if you see what I mean. It's not a specific Scottish estimate. I should stress it's a lifetime of MacLeod remedy, so it's people that have yet to retire and who may not retire, who maybe started working in 2014 but won't retire for another however many years. So it's not about, this isn't a figure that represents the money that is going to flow out today. It's over that period of time for every public sector worker impacted, local government, central government, everyone.
Yeah, I fully understand that. But obviously that still affects the UK finances, It's quite big numbers for them, and by default it will affect our finances going forward. So it is, I would be interested to know, so has nobody done a renewed estimate as we're going forward?
No.
That you're aware of?
I think I would be aware if there had been, so yes. I don't think anything else has been done, and it is a an estimate. We'll only know the true figures as we work through it.
Well, we'll probably never know the true estimates, certainly not in my lifetime, but it's still, I mean, we sometimes look at long-term planning in this committee, and I'm sure they do at Westminster as well, so I would have hoped that somebody down there would be making some kind of new estimates. I mean, I get your point that you've answered already, that we're getting more familiar with it all, more of it can be automated, all of that kind of thing. So that's all sounds quite positive, like things will speed up. The other side, though, that struck me was that you started partly with the police because you have more complete data for the police, and we've had an example of teachers and things where you don't have the same. So that makes me a little bit worried that if we're still looking for data for all these other groups, that is actually going to slow the process down rather than speed it up.
Again, it's a fair question. What we have is essentially more remediation work that we're doing on the data to get it in shape for NHS and teachers in particular, so that we can actually process it. So we have factored that work into our planning as part of the process. Of delivery. Is there anything you want to add, Francis?
I think, you know, as Chris was saying earlier, the processes that we have now are not necessarily the processes we would have had 10, 15 years ago. So as and when somebody retired 15, 20 years ago, the information that was needed for the person retiring, particularly in NHS and teachers, was pulled together, worked with, and the calculations were done via the system to make the payment. That information may be stored in different places and has been stored off the system but attached to the member. So it means that for NHS and teachers in particular, we need to go and find all of the information that we need to redo these calculations, because as and when we did these retirals, we never intended to revisit the calculation that was done at the time. So we need to find that data to redo our new calculations, and that means that we need to mine some of the data to pull that information out, to have all of the information as we go forward.
That does sound like quite a process to me.
Is.
And I mean, some of that may not even be computerised, it may be paper records, would it be?
It's likely to be attached to a record, but it may not always be in the same place.
So maybe just to be clear, because I think there has been a bit of a, you know, from a couple of things I said previously, a perception that some things are, these are paper-based processes, which they're not. What we have is a digital pension platform. The question here is how the historic data is stored in it. Because obviously it's historic data, it's not always stored in the right format, in the right place to be able to access easily and automate. And that's where the remediation exercises comes into play to correcting it.
Okay. On the NHS, in your letter of 11th March, it says that at committee you noted we were targeting 40% RSS completion by the end of March. As of 3rd March, we had completed 26%. So that sounds a little bit short.
Just give me a second here. So since even since I wrote that letter to you last week, we're in a situation now where we're at 30% with NHS because we've issued since literally last week a further over 1,700 RSSs, including for teachers, NHS and fire, which obviously the fire is ahead. So, and I think it's really important. You know, these are the projections we're working to. There is variance on that because you encounter in a kind of digital program like this, you encounter problems, you have to resolve them. Delivery, and again, this I think, you know, it was very understandable. The committee, when I spoke to you last time, saw it as, you know, it might be a sausage machine. You know, a certain number of people's. A certain processing time, you just need them and you need to work through it. But obviously it's not that type of process. It's a batch process, and batches don't always come out exactly when you're expecting it to. So I have no reason to think we're not on our overall timeframes. What I wanted to do around this, and I hope this is, obviously I appreciate it'll be a future committee that I'm coming to after May, but my intention would be to write to the committee on our progress, I would say early July, to let you know where we've got to. If I have any reason to think that our progress isn't staying in line with the timeframes we've set out, I would want to highlight that to the committee at the time and explain why, so that there's a clear understanding of the progress we're making and the challenges we might be experiencing, so keeping the committee abreast of what we're doing.
I mean, I fully accept you're going to encounter problems. I think the question for the committee is how well are you anticipating all of that? And if you give us a forecast of 40% and we actually hit 26 or 30%, it does suggest that you've been a little bit over-optimistic in some of your forecasts. And if you're over-optimistic in that forecast, it makes me wonder, are you being over-optimistic in a lot of your forecasts?
Well, in the same vein, I shared with you at the start in my opening that we were ahead on fire relative to our forecast. So, and there is an element where, these things go up and down a little bit. And it's risky for me setting out a forecast because I need to give you some kind of sense that we're making the progress. But obviously, and I think the committee said to me last time I was here, do be careful about over-promising. And I don't want to overpromise to the committee or our members, which is why we're writing to members at regular intervals in terms of the progress we're making and when they might be expecting to hear next from us if they haven't received their RSS.
Can I add to that as well that for each of our different schemes we have critical paths where we're expecting to hit a milestone to do something and then the next task picks up on the back of that. Should we encounter an issue, as with any project, your critical path will move along, but at some point it should catch up in our overall planning.
I think, obviously, as you pointed out, it's too late for this committee, but I think future committees, the more realistic you can be, the better, and build in some caution. And then if you do a bit better, everyone will be delighted, because if it keeps slipping, I'm afraid you're not going to be very popular. My final point, and the convener's already mentioned the Annex A on your letter of 11th March, which has got a little table on it. I have to say I didn't find that very helpful. And I think maybe for future committees you could kind of expand on that. I mean, it shows, if we take NHS, active numbers, 58,000, and then there's an 86.7%. It doesn't actually say, I think that by implication that is delivery, that they've got the RSS. But I just think it could be laid out. It doesn't say how many have not been. I'd be more interested in the ones who have not been got their figure yet, rather than those that are, but you could show both on a table. There's no mention of deferred in here, so I'm not quite sure where they fit. But just by way of comment, I didn't find that table helpful, and I think maybe a future committee would like something more expanded, because it is helpful to have it in a table format. That's good, because when it's all these words and we're not sure what we're comparing with what, it's quite difficult, but the table is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Elizabeth, followed by Michelle.
Thank you. Good morning. I wonder if I could seek some clarity on a point that you mentioned in the previous session, where you had very helpfully spelt out why, when it comes to the police and fire service, it's much easier because it's single employers, whereas with teachers and NHS you're having to deal with a multitude, and that's much more difficult. However, on the back of this comment, I received quite a number of constituents who were very anxious. There was a comment that Ms Graham said that we've started running a programme to see how we can gather our information from the NHS and teachers' employers in a different way. We have moved forward in the past year to be able to start planning the move to a different process, but we need to wait until we are through the remedy work to enable us to do it. Now, the implication of that to the constituents who wrote to me was that this is going to take an awful long time. Is that correct?
So, if I might, so that is. So again, this is about what we're doing to get the data right going forward. None of that has a bearing on the historic data, which is the data we're talking about in the context of remedy. We're trying to improve the systems and processes so that, for example, 10 years from now, we never have, if there's a similar exercise, we'd never have these problems again. And it's what Chris outlined in terms of the work that we're doing to move teachers at the moment onto digitising the way we receive data monthly from employers. Of course, it's a bigger exercise because there are lots of employers. And then once we've completed that work, we're looking to move on to NHS. But none of that is linked directly to delivery of remedy. That's about trying to fix things going forward so they're better, the systems and processes are better in the organisation.
Thank you for that. And I heard Mr Nairns' answer to that earlier point, but would you be able to understand how people who are awaiting their pension, when you say we need to wait until we are through the remedy work to enable us to do it, the implication is that that is going to take a considerable amount of extra time. And therefore, can I just ask about the communication to those who are awaiting their pensions, that perhaps there could be greater clarity of language to help them to understand exactly what this specific problem is? Because like Mr Mara and like Mr Mason, I've had quite a few concerns raised with me about I think a lot of people just feel that they're being let down. They don't really know what's going to happen next.
Francis, you don't share, because there's a lot we've done around communicating directly with the impacted members, and there's...
So the moving to gathering the data from the employers does not impact the remedy process that we're going through. It's about allowing us to, we are starting to move to that process, but obviously as we engage with the NHS and start to move different health boards over, once we've through a lot of remedy, we will have additional resources to help us, to help the NHS to do that. But the information that we will be getting is monthly data on employment data. It doesn't mean that we can't process the remedy based on that.
But I think the question is about our communication to our remedy impacted members, which obviously we've got a whole suite of things that we do.
It is about that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I in no way do I think this is an easy problem. It's not. And I understand what you're saying at committee. But for those people who, in difficult circumstances, who are waiting to, make decisions about life choices, etc., this is something that, it really goes to the heart of their issue. And the communication, I think, has left a sort of degree of vagueness and lack of clarity, which is just making them feel more anxious. And I would suggest that we could do something to try to improve the clarity of the communication with people who are anxiously waiting for their payment.
We've increased the frequency of our communications. So in October of this year, of 2025, we wrote to every scheme member who was yet to receive their remedial service statement. And we broke that down into the individual circumstances of those members. We sent those letters out in October 25 with a follow-up due in the next month that we will send out to them. So we'll write out to them again in April. And we communicated to them the circumstances that they were in, the work that we were doing, and then committed to writing to everybody again in April who had still not received their RSS.
You're speaking about police specifically there, because the time frames...
I'm talking about NHS.
Okay,
October we wrote to them.
Okay.
That very similar to Mr Mara, I have a constituent at NHS who has not received any communication over a period of time. And that's simply not good enough, I don't think.
So we also have our member newsletters that go out. We've sent 14 member newsletters in the past 2 years. The member newsletters cover each of the areas that we're working through and the timeframes that we're working to. We have also got resource videos on our website, but the dedicated letters did tell the members when we wrote to them in October 25 what was causing the delay, which category they fell into, and that we would be writing to them in April.
This is not the place to go into individual cases, and I won't do that. I just think it's important to put on the record that there are people who are awaiting very specific responses to the questions that they've asked, and despite your efforts to ensure that there's information through newsletters and videos, whatever it might be, there are people out there who do not have answers to very specific questions.
So whenever anybody writes to us with specific questions, we do endeavour to get back to them in a timely fashion. So if there's a member that's not received any of the communications from us, then I do hope that you've encouraged them to write to us, because we would make sure that if they for some reason it may be that they're not even impacted by remedy, because we find that sometimes what people expect, they think they are, but they're not. So there's often risk of confusion out there. The thing that I'd kind of want to stress around it is, it's understandable people want to know exactly when they might receive their statement, and they want us. And what's challenging around that is to answer that question, we would have to mine the data to understand how many factors might impact an individual, which would be a very manual process and take resource away from delivery. So there's an element where it's very hard to say to somebody, these are the 6, 10, 15 factors affecting your particular case, therefore you fall into this cohort and when we might be delivering. So what we're trying to do as we go forward is get as specific as we can at different stages. So we're in a space now with police, we're obviously in the final phases of police, where we have been able to be really specific. We know which cohorts people fall into and been able to be really specific. We're expecting in our next set of communications to fire members that we'll be able to, we weren't able to be specific with the last set of communications, but as the data emerges, as we put things through automation, it becomes clearer and we're able to communicate more specifically. So our intention is to get to the place that you're talking about as quickly as we can.
Yes.
And I appreciate the frustration with that, okay, because people want more information we're able to provide.
Yeah, and there has definitely been some progress. I understand that and I appreciate that. The point is, and I think we mentioned this at the end of the committee session last time, this is all about trying to rebuild trust between SPPA and the people who are awaiting their pensions. And for too many of them at the moment, that trust is very elusive because they do not feel that the SPPA is responding to their very specific inquiries. I think that's the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Michelle, to follow by Craig.
Actually, in a similar theme to my colleague Liz, and I recognise in the conclusion of the letter you sent us, you said, and I quote, "We recognise transparency must accompany delivery if confidence in the agency is to be restored." So it's around a similar theme: confidence, trust, communication. I'd like to understand a bit more about your communication plan. I mean, Francis has given us some detail there about whom you've written out to on what date, but I still don't have a clear sense of how you're tackling various stakeholder groupings in the form of a plan, and with a lens of doing it specifically not just to communicate but to build trust and confidence. You're here in front of us today. We can't bind the hands of a successor committee, although rest assured we're recommending that they ask that they can continue to look into this area. But I suppose I'm interested in how you're going to communicate with new MSPs that come in. Obviously, you've got an ongoing communication with the current minister. That may also change. But just help me understand from the other way round. I can see and I hear we're writing to these people at this point when more information emerges, but I just don't have a clear sense of a communication plan that addresses trust across all the stakeholder groupings.
So we have, obviously, it's a complex, as you rightly identified, it's a complex set of stakeholders. So with the, my intention with the incoming committee, I'd quite like to invite the future committee down to visit the SPPA. I think I did extend an invite to yourselves, but you were sadly too busy. And that would be an opportunity, I think, to kind of showcase different elements of what we're doing to address a whole range of things. My intention would be to write to the Committee on Progress around Remedy quarterly. Obviously, as always, I'd be very happy to come and speak to the committee, at any point that the committee felt that they wanted to come. So in terms of parliamentary communication, similarly with obviously I'll have to see what future ministers want to do and what works for them, but obviously I've got a responsibility to report on progress to my future minister, if you like, in terms of delivery and in a way that works for them in terms of progress. What we have in terms of our key stakeholders, key stakeholder groups, we have a number of governance boards, including scheme advisory boards, pension boards, all of which have employer and union representatives on them. Sitting below those groups, we also have technical working groups, which also have the same, have representatives on them, as well as communication subgroups. So those boards help us with developing our communications for members and help us resolve technical issues around delivery for members. So we work very closely with our stakeholder network to progress and deliver both remedy, but also work on improving the service full stop. So that's a key part of how we work in terms of our member communication. Obviously, the website's a key tool. I mean, that's obviously depends on members, what they, being proactive and choosing to seek out and look at things. What we've done, and I kind of explained in terms of direct-to-member communications, is what we're trying to do is move from a place where those communications are saying, look, you have an RSS, we know you're waiting for it. This is what we're working through at the moment. If you've not heard from us by this point in time, we'll give you more information, to a place where we can say, look, as we are with police now, these are the, this is the group you fall into, this is what we're doing about it, and you'll hear from us by such and such point. So we're trying to be specific where we can, but the broad communications, and we work on designing all that with the employers and union representatives in terms of what works, and they obviously assist us with that.
That covers off that, but you're getting an absolute pasting in the media. There's a continuing run of articles. How are you managing that as a constituent grouping that could get some key messages out?
We've reached out to the Herald, and we do try and encourage the Herald to report accurately.
Okay, but apart from the Herald, there's lots of other papers, and they tend to hunt and pack, and other papers will pick up. I mean, are you actively managing the media proactively rather than reactively, which is what you said about it being accurate? Are you managing that proactively?
And we weren't managing it proactively. We're moving to manage the media more proactively, and particularly correcting, trying to ensure that the media articles where they're published are correct, which sadly the one today isn't. And we will obviously be speaking to the editor there.
That's still reactive if you're correcting it. I mean, because you could be writing some long form articles and placing them up front about your approach and acknowledging, to me, a key way of starting the process of restoring trust is some of the stuff you've already done in writing us today, i.e. completely owning it, which I think you probably got the sense from the committee last time that we pushed it quite hard for an apology for people who had felt that they hadn't been communicated with. So there's still clearly work to be done. I'm going to ask you to do something. Can you turn round and look at the people sitting behind you today? Right, now, I think it's fair to concede that it's unusual that we have this size of audience for what's normally a fairly dry subject matter. Now, these are people who have chosen to give up their time, and I recognise them because some of them were here last time as well, their valuable time to come in, sit in the session. I would ask you also to engage with them on the way out, because my experience, they often write to us after these sessions, is that they're highly experienced, and you might not have been able to see it, but when you've been making some comments, I've seen vigorous shaking of heads from behind you. Now, I'm not qualified to say whether that is true or not true, but what it suggests to me is there's still quite a big disconnect between what people are being told and what you're saying today. And I'm making no aspersions on that. I'm just recognising it as a fact. So it would be great if you do that, because that immediacy of feedback, or even arranging a meeting, I think would be very helpful. My last point is around visibility, and my colleague Michael Maher was pointing that we have all been lobbied extensively from all over Scotland to this committee, plus our individual constituents. But I'm very aware, and this is where I'm uncertain, that that is only those people who have the wherewithal, the mental health to be able to write to us. Many people, as Michael Maher said, will just be resigned and arguably kind of given up. I really still don't have a sense of how people are feeling. So my last question to you is, how are you doing kind of client feedback? What data are you, kind of client satisfaction, pensioner satisfaction data are you gathering, even though I suspect it won't be very good at the moment, going through this process?
Thank you. Chris, would you like to share how we approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of gauging member feedback, we use a number of different mechanisms. Personally, I read a summary of every compliment and complaint we receive. I look at the trend analysis of what comes through. Remedy has certainly driven a higher level of dissatisfaction across the agency over the past 2 years, and we've used that to inform.
Talking about?
Quadrupling
Okay.
of complaints.
I think that would be helpful to report back to a successor committee when you provide the next update. I agree with the commentary that the base data we've got so far is quite slight. I'd like to see more, and I'd like to be able to monitor, if it were me, monitor and track satisfaction ratings, because that will tell us about improvements being made as well.
Certainly, there's 2 or 3. I think a step back. There's a number of items that we've got in progress just now. So we've just recently appointed a member experience manager. We're looking at re-energising our customer satisfaction model so that we can get more less transactional data and more qualitative data. So what we get just now is, how did your phone call go? How did your email go? We want to step away from that. If you're looking for an estimate, if you're going through a retirement journey, yeah, how did that overall process go? So we're looking at how we bring that data to the fore and understand that. Certainly in terms of complaints and compliments, we do track that and we do bring that information through. The compliments, even in and of themselves, can be quite insightful for understanding the navigable issues that our members experience, because some of the compliments we may receive may say that when they spoke to us, they phoned up, they spoke to us, they got a very, very good service, and they were able to navigate from point A to point B quite quickly and quite easily, and they were finding that difficult without having that conversation. So there are support mechanisms that we're looking at. I think the Engage platform that we've referenced, instant access to your information online. Anyone who can self-serve and wants to self-serve should be able to self-serve at any given moment, regardless of what they're looking for. For the police and fire schemes, we have extended the functionality for them to be able to do that. They're smaller schemes, so it helps us understand in those smaller schemes where the teething issues for developing and implementing these have only been implemented in the last month, so we're understanding a lot of that navigability issues that members may experience with that. The feedback so far has been very positive. There are minor issues that we're now working on, but again, yes, for us it's expanding out and understanding the whole navigation of the system.
Sorry, I know I keep saying last week's question, but in terms of staff morale, I can imagine there's a link between that, because I genuinely appreciate and understand that it will be very difficult for your staff working on these complex calculations in a situation that's kind of been foisted on them and getting pilloried in the media and indeed in the Scottish Parliament. So how are you managing staff morale to enable them to keep focused on delivering for the people at the end of this process?
So coming into the SPP, I knew that this was a transformation journey, irrespective of the McLeod Remedy specific challenges that we were facing into. And one of the things that going into that situation I was looking at was the historic staff level of engagement, the score, if you like. And for an agency like ours, despite having fabulous staff, the staff engagement score was low. It was, and I'm talking over the last 10 years. So 10 years, a staff engagement score of, I think, 55%, okay? Over the last year and a half, despite the pressure the organisation has been under, despite the pressure staff have been under in the context you're describing, We've moved that staff engagement score to 61% and a leadership change score above that of Scottish Government. So we are transforming the organisation and supporting staff with the challenges. We're seeing really positive signs for improvement, and that really reassures me, because it gives me more opportunity to build a better service in the future. And I'm excited about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think that might be something also worth reporting on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Craig, to be followed by Oliver.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. I just wanted to maybe just delve a little bit deeper both into the technical and the emotional issues that have been raised today, just to try and make sure that there's not a complacency or a sense of over-ambition running through some of your answers. I just want to give you an example of a constituent of mine, and thank you for the invitation, and if I'm on the committee in future, it would be interesting to attend, because there's obviously the issue of perception and reality, and the perception about particularly the office at Tweedbank among some of my constituents is that it still seems quite chaotic. So this is just one NHS former nurse. This is kind of her experience with the agency. She left a pension pot in place after she retired until last summer, and then she sought to access her pension. The mishaps, as she calls them, include a registered letter arriving, but then going missing, phone calls with two separate staff members where she thought their technical and English language capabilities were insufficient to have the discussion. She said that an email trail with a named member of staff who then disappeared into the ether, where people couldn't track that member of staff. And the final straw, as she described it, was on her completed form with her choices, never actually making it to Tweedbank, and then she had to resubmit her form. So that's one person's experience, that's her perception. Is that simply wrong?
Well, in this instance, it can't be wrong, because that's her experience, okay? I'd like to think that that's where things aren't right. They're in a minority of cases. Maybe Chris, you'd like to come in on that.
Certainly, it's always distressing to hear of any individual who's had such issues. I think in terms of where we have been with our NHS scheme, it's the largest scheme by far. It's the busiest scheme by far. We have been undertaking a number of remedial actions across our whole operational landscape to try to put in place the right capacity and capability. I think over the course of the last year there has been success, and that's been shown over where we are. I think every retirement application that has been received on time has been paid on time. There are no pensions being paid late. I think in terms of our phone traffic, what we've been trialling with the NHS scheme over the course of the last couple of months is the ability to make sure that the call wait times are reduced, that they're able to get through to someone, that if there are issues, I've mentioned obviously in terms of looking at complements, we know that navigation of the system sometimes isn't where it should be, but absolutely we handle 2,500 calls on average per week. Well over 95–97% of those calls are answered. We've been trialling a callback scheme, so if the call wait is too long, and the call waits have been high at times over the past year, then it's an automated callback system so that it dials them out as soon as someone's available, so that they can get access to the support, the advice, the guidance that they need to be able to take them through that journey. In terms of there's a wider piece that Francis's transformation teams are looking at just now in terms of the digital application. So the application process just now is an application process that we've had in place for decades. So it's a form that's completed by the member, issued to the employer, and then comes through to SPPA. There's 2 or 3 legs of that journey. There's different places that could go wrong. What we're looking at just now is a digital process whereby that is trackable by the member, it's completed online, it goes through to the various components of that, and it's fully integrated to our systems so that we can get absolute clarity over where it's at, and the member can see that at any given moment. That's in testing just now. It's actually ready to be launched, the area that we're looking at to complete the last journey for launch of that is the pen testing, penetration testing, to make sure it's cyber secure before we push that out. So yeah, there's absolutely steps that we're undertaking just now and have been over the course of the last few months to improve the service that we're offering members. That's an ongoing journey for us. I think there's still many miles to go, but I think there are milestones that have been passed and are in immediate view just now.
Fine. Just for clarity, for that particular constituent, all of those calls are dealt with in-house. There's no external call centres, any third-party agencies being used?
No.
No, fine. So in terms of the 100 new members of staff that have been brought on temporary contracts, what's the training and onboarding that's taking place with them to make sure they've got the proficiency to be able to deal with the sorts of inquiries they may be dealing with? And are they dealing with the more simple end of the spectrum?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in that because it's quite a comprehensive piece. We have taken steps over the course of the last year to compartmentalise some of our processes. So, as you say, are there elements of the process that newer member staff can undertake? Absolutely. Other items of work that we've undertaken, we've got a single point of knowledge. So there's a bank of training materials that any of our colleagues can self-access at any time. We've reworked the induction process from back to front and extended that and expanded on that quite quickly. We've added a fairly sequential series of training modules that staff can undertake as they join the agency so that they understand our data, our systems, our processes, our regulations. There's a lot for them to take on. They are assigned buddies, peers, and they are supported into their new operating environment. One of the steps that I've undertaken over the last 2 years is to effectively have those new inductees present back to us after a couple of months in the agency so that they identify areas where the training has worked well, where it hasn't. We've used that to inform and guide remodelling of the induction. So the induction that we have today is quite different from where it was 2 years ago. It's a little different from where it was a year ago. New colleagues joined the office yesterday and they're going through a fairly expansive 6-week classroom training into 6-week modular training within their operational areas.
Obviously, there was a period where you had to throw the kitchen sink at it and you were bringing lots of people in. Is that an admission that perhaps in the past not enough was done to bring in staff who fully understood perhaps the roles they were going to be asked to do?
I wouldn't say so. I think it's more for me. I've joined the agency in the past couple of years. I've moved into the chief ops role. I've got very, very distinct views over how we should onboard colleagues, over how we should manage training. I think from a leadership perspective, I haven't built a team until the team can survive without me. And we need to ensure that the structure is in place, the infrastructure is there, that there's subject matter experts that are trained in how to coach and train, that there's materials that they can access, that there's training support that's available to them. All of this has been available, but it's perhaps not been updated as recently as it should have been. It's perhaps not been remodelled using some of the new coaching models that we have available. So it's more about updating and future-proofing that.
Just in terms of the kind of over-ambition, obviously, the Auditor-General in his report said, the press release accompanying his report said, I am concerned about the SPPA's capacity to deliver outstanding remedy statements by the extended timescales. And yet, Dr Pathurana, in your letter to us, you say, we remain on track to meet these timelines for completion. Why haven't you been able to persuade the Auditor-General so far that he should have confidence in your statement?
So what we've been doing, and I think there's work to do, okay, and certainly I do want to provide that assurance to the Auditor-General as well. We've got in-depth 3 monthly planning cycles where we're planning and forecasting for the different, because Remedy isn't it's not a single project. There are 12 different work streams to deliver all the different things we need to deliver over the 4 different pension schemes. So we're doing detailed planning and forecasting over 3-month periods. what we need to be able to do is be able to forecast that further forward and plan further forward, which is what we're moving towards. So I think as we get to that point, as we're able to plan in more depth going forward, I think I'll better provide more assurance to the Auditor General as we move forward. But it's a work in progress. I think we still have a lot to do. I have no reason to think we're not on track in terms of the delivery and progress we're making. You know, like we discussed earlier, some things are slightly up, and where I said there'd be some things are slightly down, but that's kind of the nature of the programme. But there's work to do. But at the same time, as I shared with you earlier about the work we're doing with NHS England, if there are ways in which we can develop solutions jointly that take us further forward, allow me to move things forward quicker, that would be fabulous. I'm not promising that, but that would be fabulous too.
Finally, Stephen Boyle also said, and I recognise you welcome the Section 22 report, but he said the SPPA needs to provide greater transparency on its progress and take action to address other issues regarding specifically governance and transparency. Having reviewed your letter, do you think there is still work you need to do on governance and transparency, and how quickly will you get it to a point where you are allaying the concerns that the Auditor General is setting out to us?
The Auditor General's report's a moment in time. It's in relation to the 24-25 budget cycle year. There were absolutely issues with things within that time frame. I think in terms of both the feedback and the structure, there's lots of work we've done in that space since then. So I'm assured that the governance and transparency is there. We've got a really, we've got a really clear framework document which governs everything. We have 10 different boards that we are accountable in different ways to. We have very clear feedback from our outgoing chair of our Management Advisory Board that things are much better now than they were over the 8-year period that they were previously the chair. We have, I'm really pleased to share with you that I've got Paul Gray, who's coming as the new chair of my Management Advisory Board, and somebody I think you will all know as former Chief Exec of the NHS in Scotland. The Audit and Risk Committee that I have also, again, have expressed at the last Audit and Risk meeting that we had just recently that, again, they can see significant improvement and are sure things are in a much better place than they were before. So I think governance is never something you stop working on. So yes, absolutely, we'll keep refining what we do, keep making better. But I think there's significant improvement that's been made since those things have been identified.
And just because you've raised it, there has been in the past quite significant churn within the Audit and Risk Committee. It's never particularly good when you see that. Consistency is key in that kind of body. Are you pretty confident that you won't see similar churn in the future? I'm
not expecting to see. I mean, there's a lot of churn in part because people's terms were coming to an end. I do need to think about whether I want to bring additional people into the Audit and Risk Committee with the right skills to help support us going forward, so it might grow. That's something for me to reflect on with the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. We've got a fabulously experienced chair who's got 20+ years experience in the rail sector with transformation experience, so very, very supportive. And a chair that really, with any organisation as an Audit and Risk Committee, you have to work with where the organisation is to help it get to better. And that's exactly where our Audit and Risk Committee is.
Oliver, welcome to the Finance and Public Administration Committee.
Thank you. I thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to be able to join. My colleague Liz Smith had said some of your communications were vague. I mean, I'd put it to you that they're actually quite cold. You know, you're very process-driven. It's all about calculators and statistics and how many cases. But do you recognise that for someone sitting at home, who's stressed, where this is something that's consuming their life, potentially consuming valuable time in their retirement, the communications, they don't recognise the frustration or the anger people rightly feel, do they?
So we, I think, have been consistent in being open, consistent in being apologetic as well, in terms of where we are or where the agency is. It's kind of like a token apology. I mean, it's a sort of token apology. It doesn't really recognise the gravity of what this means for individuals.
That's why they're frustrated.
Certainly we can take the feedback and we can look at our communications and see if there are things we can do to improve them. What's challenging in all of it is giving people the accurate information they're looking for. And of course, as you rightly understand, pensions are super complex and this is it's a hard place for people to navigate. We recognise that that's something that we've got to help people do. But we'll take your feedback.
Okay. You also said that you write back to people when they raise concerns with you. I've done that as an MSP, and I feel like I've been fobbed off myself. I feel like you're right. I get these letters back that say you're going to speak to the constituent. The constituent then gets a phone call from someone within the organisation who then says they're getting a phone call because their MSP's written a letter, but they don't get any sort of answer to their actual queries. It's like a tick box so that you can then write back and just say that you've, as if somehow by speaking to someone again and telling them the same information. And that's what worries me in relation to Michael Mara's point around these individual escalations. It feels like you say people can escalate their concerns, but when they do that, they get 2 or 3, what I would say, letters or communications back that just tell them the same thing again, and it doesn't move past go.
And I think, and again, this goes back to we can only share the information we have, and people may want more information, and we don't have that information. Where we have more information, we always share it. So because, and that's, I think, in particular, the challenge around McLeod Remedy is that because of all the complexity of it, knowing the answers to individuals' queries can be really, really, really challenging. So again, yes, I appreciate that they might get the same response and want more information than we're able to give them. But we, at every point, are communicating the information we have available.
My experience with other public organisations is when some people are really upset, when they've got really challenging circumstances and they're unhappy with the reply they've got, at the very least, they speak to someone within the organisation. People make time or they put a bit of effort in to finding out what the circumstances are behind the frustration, and they try and at least interact with them on a human level, to convey that apology that you're giving today. But my experience is that's not what people get when they interact with you. They can literally get a copy and paste of the same letter they've already had once already, and that's obviously not satisfied them the first time, and it probably increases the frustration to just keep getting the same thing again.
So I hear the point you're making. There are lots of instances where, at least I hear, where our pensions administrators have spent lots of time with members and have resolve the problems where they're able to resolve them. I think the challenge here is where they're not able to resolve them. Chris, is there something you want to say?
Yeah, we do have a dedicated customer care team who speak to members on a regular basis, particularly where there is a complaint or is dissatisfaction, and they will spend time with those members where they can. They themselves as staff have expressed their own frustration at times where we don't have information to give members over certain points. And I think there have been times in the past year or two where we've been perhaps awaiting information to allow us to move forward, whether that be guidance or other elements in relation to taxation or interest or various components. And I think, the members experiencing that frustration, our staff member may experience that frustration. What I would say is that certainly we are very, very adept and very, very willing to speak to members on a regular basis. The sheer volume of phone calls that we're dealing with pay testament to that. I think I would also paint a picture beyond that, which is the handling time for our calls is significantly higher than most other comparable organisations within financial services areas. So, we're spending on occasions an hour with a member going through details and going through information with them. Our average handling times are significantly higher than most organisations I've worked with. So, yes, there are frustrations around a lack of information where that information isn't available. Where that information is available, we absolutely do share it and spend time explaining that to the member.
Okay, I'll leave that line of question there because I don't think make... Is it?
Hold a wee second. Michael wants to come in a wee supplementary on that issue.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Convener. I mean, for clarity, you talked in the answer to Oliver Mundell, you talked about in the escalation process about getting people more information. My point is that they want a decision. They want, when somebody is at the end of life, or they may have cancer in the family, they're trying to make decisions. It's not a case of they're asking for a status update through an escalation process. They want a quicker decision because it's an issue for them about how they live out the last months of their lives. So can you give us assurance that they get a quicker decision if it's escalated appropriately?
So we can, and I think that the risk in answering this is we're conflating different things, our normal ways of managing end-of-life processes and how we manage those for people that might be applying for that today, which all works very well, separately to the question mark around people that might be waiting in the context of remedy for an additional RSS, which is separate to the normal or even specific retirement processes.
But I'm sorry, Dr. Batharana, for these people it isn't separate. For these people it's about actually how much money will they have when they're in those circumstances. So it might be a separate pathway to you and your organisation, but I'm asking you whether we're going to get that decision more quickly. I'm afraid it's you that's conflating the different issues in terms of the answer to Oliver Mundell and the answer to my question. What I was asking was if somebody is in those situations, can they get a quicker decision? It sounded to me now that you're saying that they can't.
The answer is yes. So there are instances, certainly I oversee approvals on a semi-regular basis, thankfully not too frequently, where end-of-life cases are presented to us and asked for those to be expedited. In every given case we were able to expedite that, absolutely we do expedite that.
To MSPs in writing the process for accessing that expedited pathway?
Yes,
okay,
I'm able to do so. I think in terms of responding to that, I did mention unions and employers. I think where a member is end of life or there's a terminal diagnosis, quite clearly they may engage with their employer or the union or their support network within their locale. Those unions we have set out, there are engagement managers dedicated to various schemes and employers. And equally, they can make contact directly with us at any given time to set that out. And I'm quite happy to confirm that.
Just thank
Yeah, no, that's what I wanted to come back to, because that now doesn't sit very easily with what Francis Graham said earlier. And when we heard it was wrong to manually calculate for some people and then have to revisit later. But you're saying you do that in some circumstances where someone's near the end of their life or they have particular financial hardship. You can pull them out manually and expedite them.
Yeah, my response is where we can do that, we are doing that, and we have done that, and we will do that.
But where we can is not the same as you do.
In every instance.
So,
no.
so the answer is you don't. You can in every instance.
Not in every instance. If the information is unavailable for us to be able to calculate a case or produce a response, it's difficult to do so.
And do you have any idea of how many individuals fall into that category where?
But to be clear, we'll still expedite the process of giving them their their pension. That's expedited, whether within that context and in a subset of cases we're able to,
give them the remedy.
Give them the remedy choice as part of it. That's the context. So we'll always expedite the process.
So just for absolute clarity, there are people who potentially get in touch with you who are at end of life, who are not able to access the full amount of money they're entitled to. Your process doesn't allow them to have their case expedited, does it?
I'm aware of only one instance where that's happened. In every instance where it's been escalated to me or a case has been identified to me where there was a terminal diagnosis or end-of-life diagnosis, we've been able to process all bar one.
Okay. And then in terms of successful challenges, you'd said you were confident the final figures you gave were correct and that the government actuarial department have kind of signed off on that. Have there been any successful challenges that you're aware of? No, none.
None.
Okay. Fine.
Okay, thank you very much for all of that. That's concluded questions from the committee, but I do think it's clear that there does seem to be a disconnect between how the SPPA perceive you're delivering, and perhaps, as we just heard from Michael just a few minutes ago, how the clients perceive it. So I think that's clearly an area that I believe the committee would want you to work on. This is obviously a very emotional issue for many people, very deeply frustrating, and I think the human cost should always be at the forefront of what's being done in terms of delivering decisions promptly to as many people as possible. Now, I do think you should have the last word, though, Dr. Patharana. So, if there are any further points you want to make that we feel you want to expand on, or you feel we haven't touched on that perhaps should have done, yourself and your team now have an opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Convener. So, as ever, I'm very grateful for your time, very grateful for the questions. As I've said, I'm very I'll very happily come back and speak to the committee at future points in the progress and obviously report back to you. And there's a number of things that you've touched on that we'll obviously get back to you in writing on and set them out. But thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for your evidence today. I appreciate you're also moving to public audit soon, so you have to go through all this again from perhaps a different perspective. Now, as this was our last public item, we will shortly move into private to consider and agree our legacy report. Before we do so, however, as this was our last meeting and my last as a convener in this Parliament, I want to thank all committee members for their diligent and collegiate work and thoughtful contributions throughout this 5-year session. And I trust that those who do not return, either by personal choice or the choice of their electors, will go on to bigger and better things, or perhaps enjoy an active and enjoyable retirement, no doubt with the assistance of the SPPA. I also want to thank our excellent clerking team, Spice and all others who have supported our work over these last 5 years and indeed given evidence to this committee. So we'll now break for 5 minutes before moving into private session and to allow our witnesses broadcasting the official report and the public to leave. Thank you.